NRATV with Bill Whittle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Hot Mike here on NRATV. Hot Mike, unfortunately, is not going to be able to be here today. He was hit by an ice cream truck while taking a selfie in the street. Apparently, he had an empty cone and a big sign that says, "I can't wait," and wasn't paying attention. The truck knocked him probably 20 or 30 yards. We expect he'll be out of the hospital over the weekend, so I'm sure he'll be back on Monday. As far as today's show goes, I want to talk about the idea of fighting back, and I want to talk about strategies for fighting back that the right has not used much before. The left has used them to great effect, and so the question is going to be, are these tactics that we want to adopt, and if we do, what do we want to do with them? So let's set the stage a little bit. Anytime we see people disrupting a show, we see people, disrupting a Trump rally, for example. We found out some of those people, many of them were paid by John Podesta. But any kind of unruliness, any kind of outspokenness, after all of the conservative speakers that we've seen being shouted down, harassed, and so on, the idea of us doing that to speakers on the left wing, for many of us, is a little bit off-putting. Conservatives generally tend to be law and order people, and because we're law and order people, we just find things like that and little things like, mocking the president in pictures and all the rest of it. We just find it to be childish and in bad taste. However, we may have to reassess that. And the reason we may have to reassess that is because we are suffering from the same enormous disadvantage that decent people suffer from when they deal with indecent people, dishonest people. We fail to understand, as Republicans and conservatives, we fail to understand the depths of the hatred that the left feels towards the right, the animosity, the personalization of it, and most especially the sense that since they believe they're on the right side of history, since they believe that all of their policies are helping poor people and black people, when in point of fact they're making their lives much worse. But because they believe that, because they believe that their mission is to bring about a sort of earthly paradise, heaven on earth here, they have come to the conclusion from the beginning of the progressive movement that if we have to tell a little lie in order to get the big truth, that's what we'll do. We've been talking about the CNN scandal last couple of days, and we'll be talking about it today as well with a participant in it. And so we have this sense of law and order and that we should do things the right way. But what do you do when you're fighting an opponent who's this dishonest? Is it time to start fighting back on their level? This is a very serious discussion to have. As I mentioned once before, the Marines in the Pacific Theater fought pretty fair against the Japanese until the Japanese unit lured some Marines out to rescue them, and then they dropped the white flag and opened up with machine guns. After that, the rules were different. The rules are different with the kind of people we're running against in Al-Qaeda and ISIS as well. So I guess the question is, two questions. Are they tactics that we're talking about effective? And number two, even if they are effective, should we be using them? So let's go back to a story we've been covering for quite a while now, and that's got to do with the play in the park in New York City. It's Shakespeare in the Park. The play is Julius Caesar, and infamously now, the man playing Caesar is exactly like Donald Trump. The actor who plays him has played Donald Trump before. He gets to be knifed on stage, and it's a bloody, gory mess. Most people who've seen Julius Caesar say they've never seen it that violently done or anything else. So look, folks, let's not mince words. What this is this is the chance of the left to get their little wish fulfillment out, and it's a little chance for them to feel like, oh, okay, well, I got to do what I always wanted to do anyway. Now, that's been going on for quite a long time. When the story broke, a couple of big companies pulled out, but they said they're going to stick with the play, and they have been sticking with the play, and it gets a standing ovation pretty much every night. And we've watched this go on and tolerated it because there's really not much we can do, except that a couple of nights ago, something very different happened. Take a look at this.
Stop the normalization of political violence against the right. This is unacceptable. You cannot...
Get off the stage! All right, ladies and gentlemen. gentlemen, we're going to pause. We're going to pause. Security.
This is violent.
Security, please.
What was going through the mind of the woman when she did that? Let's ask her. She's here as our guest today. I've known Laura Ouma for a little while, actually. We've been to many of the same conservative events. We've had a chance to talk a little bit behind the scenes. I heard about the person standing up and basically just in moral outrage protesting what was going on stage. I had no idea it was Laura, but when I heard it was Laura, I wasn't surprised it was Laura. Hey, Laura, how are you? Good to see you, and thanks for joining us today.
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. First question, I think, Laura, is when you did this, was this something that just kind of spontaneously came over you, having just gone to see the play just to get an idea of it? Or was this something that you determined in advance you were going to do because you just found it intolerable?
It was planned. As you said, the play is notorious for, promoting a very violent scene against a Donald Trump lookalike character. The play itself, Julius Caesar, was completely bastardized and turned into a modern day political comedy instead of a tragedy, which is what Shakespeare is supposed to be. And after the shooting of Representative Steve Scalise, I started thinking to myself, why are crazed liberals acting out in violent ways against the right? What is inspiring them? And I started to think about Kathy Griffin and the severed ISIS photo shoot with the head of Donald Trump. And then I started thinking about Julius Caesar. So living in New York, I decided that I was going to go to the play and protest it. But, getting on stage, that was kind of a spontaneous thing once I arrived.
Well, it certainly got everybody's attention, and it developed into this very debate that we're having now because it actually had a real effect. It had a real effect. I think it was shocking to the people on that stage, and I think those people on that stage perhaps were confronted by kind of the emotional reality of what they were doing. I'm not saying it changed any minds or anything, but it certainly got their attention. What happened to you afterwards, Laura? Did you get in super, super big trouble, or did you just kind of get a little, don't do that again?
Well, I continued protesting after they kicked me out of the theater because the theater's located in Central Park. And so I kept protesting and screaming outside, raising awareness for the normalization of political violence against the right. And police officers arrested me, and I'm being charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct. So I have a court date in August. And I was taken to jail where I stayed for a couple hours, but then I was released.
Makes me wonder how many of these Antifa thugs and attempted murderers who go around beating up people with with bicycle locks. I wonder how many of them get arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Do you think that even that's a double standard in terms of how you were treated with so many people in the Black Lives Matter movement and in the Donald Trump inauguration movement, not only just trespassing and disturbing the peace, but actively destroying property? I didn't see a whole lot of those people going down.
No, that's the point, right? So the left, they have selective outrage. They're completely fine with their own supporters going to conservative events and shutting them down and using violent tactics to shut down and prevent people from speaking. I disrupted a play for 33 seconds, and then I left when I was asked to leave. I didn't use any violence. I didn't use any profanity. I didn't destroy any property. It was just a quick disruption. And it just goes to show the double standard, right? Because what did I use? I used my voice, right? The greatest weapon that we have is our voice. And I was arrested for it. I was arrested for exercising my right to free speech and my right to peacefully protest. And you look at a lot of these Antifa rallies that I myself have attended as a journalist, and I've been assaulted at Antifa rallies before, right? I've had my phone smashed on the ground. That's destruction of property. And the people who did that to me, they weren't arrested. But there seems to be this double standard or this, political witch hunt against conservatives who would like to exercise their free speech and really just fight back against violence in a nonviolent way.
Okay. Yeah, in a nonviolent way. Exactly. That's exactly right. So here's the big question, Laura. I think it's a question I've been asking for many, many years before this happened, the play or your protest that night. And I know a lot of conservatives worry about this too. We are law and order people, generally speaking, conservatives. We're the kind of people who would rather lose by the rules than win by cheating. It's just not even a question for us. We find these kind of things to be disruptive, to say the least, and typical of the left, and unpleasant for us in many ways to watch. So what would you say to somebody who came at you with that conservative approach? Because I used to feel that way. I don't anymore. What would you say to somebody who said, listen, by doing this, you're simply stooping to the same level as these people, and you've actually made things worse in terms of our reputation?
Well, look, people have been saying that to me, right? You have people like Ben Shapiro and David French who have publicly attacked me online and have, called me a disgrace to the conservative movement and have called me a snowflake and an SJW. But look, right, if anybody's familiar with Saul Alinsky and Alinsky tactics, the way you beat your opponent is by playing by their own book of rules. And that is something that I have taken to heart and really implemented throughout my journalistic career, even during my time at Project Veritas and now during my time at Rebel Media. And it's effective. It gets the job done because it shows the hypocrisy of the left, because when you force them to play by their own rule book, they end up denouncing their own tactics, which is what we saw. We saw them denounce somebody protesting a play, but isn't that what they do? Isn't that exactly what they do? They go to events and they shut them down and they interrupt people who are speaking or people who are performing. I mean, look, it's ridiculous because conservatives are never promoting violence at their events, right? This was a mock assassination porn, as I like to call it, and they were encouraging people and celebrating the idea of assassinating President Trump. So I don't even think that it's comparable to a conservative event. I think that that liberals and people on the left and even neocons who are criticizing me are using free speech and artistic expression as a pretext to inciting violence against the right.
Well, this is why I'm changing my mind, and have in fact changed my mind on this. And our friend Mike Walsh has written about this quite a few times because he understands how desperately, deadly serious the left is. You mentioned Saul Alinsky. For those of you unfamiliar with him, he's basically the guy who wrote the book on community organizing, which is essentially agitating for far left-wing socialist and even communist causes. And Alinsky wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, and one of the rules was make your opponent play by his own rules. And now this is a much bigger thing than what just happened in Central Park. Hang on a second, Laura. What they do basically is they use our own decency against us. Political correctness, calling somebody a racist, only works against somebody who's not a racist. If you're a racist, you're proud of being a racist. Political correctness works because decent people do not want to be seen as racists or homophobes, and they don't want to be seen as disruptive or breaking the law, so they shut up and they don't do anything. And that's the entire intention of the left. They use our decency as sort of as a crack in our armor or a weakness in our immune system. They know that by doing things that we consider to not be decent or civilized, we will not be able to respond to that because it's not in our nature. We follow the rules. So it must be quite a shock to them when we find people like you and others who've decided to play by their rules.
Right, exactly. And, you've read Rules for Radicals. The rule I'm referring to is rule number 4, right? Make the enemy play by their own set of rules. And it's not just a tactic that the left uses. James O'Keefe, for example, is in the news recently for his video expose of CNN. He's on the record saying that that Saul Alinsky is kind of a mentor to him, and that he's adopted those tactics to be so successful in guerrilla journalism, right? That's why he's so successful, and why Project Veritas has so much success in exposing the left. Barack Obama used Rules for Radicals as his guidebook as a community organizer. So I would encourage a lot of people to read it, and it will help you really understand the way that these people think And if you know how they think, it will arm you with the tools to fight back against their attacks.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton wrote her thesis on Saul Alinsky. I sure would like to have read that paper. When we come back, we're going to be talking more with Laura Ouma. We're going to talk a little bit more about Project Veritas and this sort of unconventional way to fight back against the tactics of the left. We'll be back in just a few moments. This is Bill Whittle's Hot Mic on NRATV.